Hi guys, welcome to another amazing episode. Tonight we have Dr. Alarik Arenander with us. Dr. Arenander, thank you so very much for giving us your time.
Pleasure to be here.
So just a quick rundown. He's a UCLA trained neuroscientist. He's the director of Brain Research Institute, president of Leaders Brain, president of Anti-Aging Company. He has spent last 4 decades researching brain development and human potential.
Sounds pretty good.
I think I've covered everything.
Sounds great.
All right. So, how did you get into the brain research and development field?
When I was growing up, I wanted to be in science to try it. I guess I was trying to figure out life, and science seemed to be the way of doing it.
Right.
I can also cook and sew, but I like science. And then somehow I got to the brain, because it seemed like everything led to the brain. And, you're just studying this. I used to study little things and dishes, and now all of a sudden the brain apparently seemed to be the most important thing. So I got into the brain long time ago, very long time ago, and it's fantastic. The brain is everything. I mean, the liver is important too, but it doesn't talk, and it doesn't get Alzheimer's. So brain is just fantastic, and it's been a great journey, and it's going on and on. And
it's still going on.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things you find in science is that the longer you do it, the less you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And the more experiments you do, the more you realize you're never going to have a chance to do that experiment or that experiment. So you just focus on what's really going to be maximum joy or maximum benefit to society.
Right.
Because I used to do all kinds of stuff in the laboratory, and I'm going, this is interesting, and I'm contributing, but it's not really contributing as much as I could contribute. So as soon as I was able to get out of the laboratory, then I started going around the world giving out knowledge and experience and technologies that I thought really could make a difference.
Right. So starting from brain, you got into spirituality and you also got into TM. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I got into spirituality because, first of all, I loved life, so life is spiritual. So that was easy. The second thing is, I remember I was in the laboratory one night, graduate school, and I realized that society had given me enough education to realize that things were broken, right? That all this education was like not helping much of anybody, okay? I mean, there's a lot of good intentions in the world, but not much was working. And it doesn't look good for the future. And I was part of the future. So I had to make a decision. I had to find something, and it wasn't what I already told me. So I already knew what they told me. All these different fields, sewing, cooking, biology, biochemistry, quantum mechanics. I had courses in that, okay?
Right.
Not in the sewing, I learned that on my own. But what happened is that I realized there's another level of knowledge out there, and so I started looking around. And I tried this thing, and I not necessarily physically tried it, but I read about this, read about that.
Right.
And then I ran into TM, Transcendental Meditation.
So was there some opposition regarding it, because traditional science does not go hand in hand with spirituality?
Well, remember, I had made a decision that traditional science didn't know what the heck they were doing.
Okay.
I mean, they had modus operandi, and they had ideas, and they had intentions, and they're all good people.
Right.
But they're as ignorant as everybody else.
Right.
They just talk good and have very good rationale, and they have labels, and but they're like everybody else, right? Maybe not as corrupt as the politicians, but they have some corruption too. I mean, it's the whole idea is that everybody is doing the best they can
to contribute.
But there had to be something else out there that I was not given in my education.
Right.
So I was seeking that. And I was living in a community where it was pretty hot stuff. So it wasn't hard to find it. I didn't have to go searching much. It was like everywhere. It just hadn't been in my life. And so.
Right. So starting with TM, what was the first effect that you personally experienced, and then you started telling everyone about it?
My first experience was unbelievable. Now, not everybody has an unbelievable experience, but I had an unbelievable experience. Okay. I mean, on many levels. I mean, it was just like, whoa, this thing's pretty amazing.
Right.
I had great. I expected it'd be working because I figured everything they said was good, but I didn't expect what I got. It was fantastic, and it's just been fantastic ever since. Everything keeps growing. So, I mean, everybody has their own unique experiences, but mine were very fulfilling and very opening. I mean, it's like, whoa, there's some stuff out here. And there's some stuff I can know.
So, talking of experiences, compared to other meditative practices, how is TM easier and far more opening than other practices?
Yeah. Most practices deal with the surface of the ocean. And the surface of the ocean either has ripples or it has giant waves, but it's always active, and it's bouncing around. But regardless of how big the surface is of the ocean, If you go deep enough in the ocean, there's nothing happening. It's silent. So that silence is in everybody. It's in me, you, everybody. Anybody walking in the street, whether they meditate or even know that meditation exists, it's in there.
Right.
They live on the surface, all the stress and strain and worries and concerns and doing this and thinking and so forth. But they don't have the experience of that silence. They should, because that inner silence is, first of all, the source of who they are. It's the source of all their thoughts, the source of all their creativity and happiness. In other words, that's the bank. And they're out here in the marketplace with their little coins trying to figure out how to live life, when actually the whole bank's inside.
Yeah.
So most forms of meditation, and it's just time. Time does this. Over time, things get lost and misinterpreted. And so all these meditations are well-intended, but they're all surface.
Right.
Now, occasionally something will drop in and they go, wow, I had an experience. But, good luck in a lifetime, okay?
Right.
So the idea here is that TM is a systematic approach to go from the surface waves, which we enjoy life in, and just spontaneously and actually dip into that silence and experience that inner calm, that inner source of thought. And that changes life, because when you dip into that silence with the mind, it takes the brain with it. And the brain gets very deep and quiet, gets very orderly. In fact, the most orderly we've ever seen in modern science.
Right.
And when the brain gets more orderly, it works better. So in other words, everybody has huge potential, but we're not using it because we've never wired the brain to use it.
Right. So, what are the different technologies along with TM? Like, different sound technologies. You've written a paper about Vedic literature and its effect and all. Can you give us a little bit of download on how it affects the brain?
Right. Sound, like everything else, starts at the depth of consciousness and depth of our mind, and then percolates out and we hear it in the outside. But sound is across all the dimensions of existence, okay? From the very subtle, absolute, unmanifest to the gross bangs and bings out here. So every sound has an effect. Some are good, some are bad, and many are neutral. And we all have preferences, and they all have some influence on our physiology, all the way to the level of DNA. Every sound we hear reaches the DNA in some form or other. And if we like it, it makes the DNA a little bit this way. And if we don't like it, it makes the DNA this way. And it comes out into our physiology as we feel good or not so good.
Right. Is it only sound, or are there other elements which are also affecting?
Everything from the environment. Because everything is ultimately a sound. Even vision's a sound.
Right.
Every touch is a sound. Everything is vibration.
Right.
But we think of sound usually as auditory.
Right.
But all vibrations penetrate all our sensory organs. And they penetrate all the way into the brain, to the center of every cell, to the DNA.
Right.
And that sound structure of environmental influence, environmental information, gets analyzed on the level of the DNA. And then it percolates back out through the cell, to the brain, to the body, and then we project it back out into the atmosphere.
Right.
So it's a loop. Everything from the outside goes in, bounces against this huge reservoir of intelligence in our DNA, and then we bring it back out.
Right. So can we say on a certain level that it's affecting the DNA? It's mutating the DNA in a way?
I wouldn't say it's mutating, because mutating has a bad sense to it.
Right.
But, I mean, you could actually probably use that term, because we do mutate it through toxicity and chemicals and stress and stuff like that, and drugs and medicine. These all corrupt the DNA.
Right.
And so bad sounds could corrupt the DNA too. Nobody's ever done a study, but I bet if you do a lot of hard rock, you probably find a lot of things going on in the DNA that they don't want to know about. Okay? They just want to listen to the hard rock. So everything has an influence, right? Nobody's paid money to study that yet, but sooner or later they go, all right, but that's how I grew up. And
it's a proven fact, even while studying and everything, listening to Bach or Mozart, it has a better influence on your functioning. Yeah,
there's a lot of research now showing how music and sound influence brain functioning and actually the physiology. And it's not just all the most recent stuff. This is an ancient thing. In Vedic times, back many tens of thousands of years ago, the original cultural value of this land, actually, Veda, that there's a whole science of consciousness and science of sound, vibrations. Because from the Veda, everything is consciousness, everything is vibration. And so how you use vibration determines who you are and how you progress and evolve towards enlightenment.
You've worked with high-performing individuals across several continents.
Yes.
What were the 3 common patterns of brain functioning which always stood out?
Let's see. Coherence.
Okay.
Coherence. And coherence.
Okay.
That means that when their brain was orderly, just like this gentleman we were looking at, when their brains are orderly, they're going to perform better. Now, they may be going to be a better shoemaker, right? Or they be a better CEO, or they're a better clown, or a better stand-up comedian. Whatever you got to be in your life, you want to be the best of it.
Right.
And that only happens when your brain is wired properly
Right.
and it's connected properly. And most of our life, in fact, most of Western culture, and that impacts the rest of the world usually, it does everything to disengage the brain, to actually fragment the brain, to actually make it more dysfunctional. Our diets, our routines, our food,
Right.
self-medication, all this stuff basically reduces coherence.
Right.
And so you can imagine that we have a problem with society because most people are constantly reducing themselves as opposed to improving themselves,
Right.
even though they want to improve themselves.
So while working with such high-performing individuals, what were the 3 rituals, practices which they did in their everyday life, which were leading to all of this? What were the 3 common practices?
Well, first of all, meditation is the most powerful. Transcendental meditation in particular. Some other forms of meditation have some value, but not in comparison to TM.
Okay.
TM, you actually sink into the self,
Right.
and you liberate all that energy, creativity, and intelligence.
Right.
The others, they play around the surface. They have some stress release and
Right.
some relaxation, but that's a fundamental difference.
Right.
So if you really want to gear the system up,
Right.
you TM.
Right.
So TM, then they need sleep,
Okay.
because TM does not replace sleep,
Okay.
and everybody needs sleep,
Right.
even though they think that the iPad is a good equivalent to sleep. Okay, I can sit there all night and do stuff and
Right.
listen to my tunes and stuff like that.
Right.
So you need rest as TM and orderliness. You need sleep and orderliness, because people don't realize that sleep actually is a way to integrate all your memories. In a way, during the day we experiment with things. We experiment with all these different perceptual patterns and ideas and so forth.
Right.
And then at night we go back and go through all of them,
Right.
and we analyze how we're going to integrate them and how we reconstruct our reality and our version of life.
Right.
And we wake up with that new reality. Now, it usually doesn't change much, so we don't see the difference.
Right.
But every night we're reprocessing everything,
Right.
and we do that through the different stages of sleep, and there's different ripples in the brain and so
Right.
forth. It's really a marvelous phenomenon.
Right.
We don't sleep at night in ignorance. We sleep in ignorance usually, but everything's being processed.
And the third one would be
What would be a third one? Exercise is a very good one, because without exercise, you're not going to get the body healthy and the brain healthy and the blood. I mean, the brain needs blood, and it needs a healthy heart and the whole thing.
Right.
You can't have a bad physiology and a good brain.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It's got to be good. Right? And unfortunately, most of society is heading in the direction of not so good.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so for a high-performance brain, what are the 3 organic supplements which you would say anyone can use?
Oh, let's see. I'm thinking about mainly aging, but good supplement. Well, omegas, absolutely omegas. Omega-3s. There's 2 kinds of omegas, 3s and 6s.
Okay.
6s are the ones that we have in our society now. All the grains and
Okay.
all the oils and stuff like that,
Right.
which back 1,000 years ago or 100 years ago, we didn't
Right.
have. Right? We didn't have all that.
Right.
Right? And we didn't have sugar and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so basically the omega-3s, which are found in all the pulses and chias and hemp and stuff like that, and in fish and stuff like
Right.
that, all those build a physiology. We need both, but
Right.
it used to be sort of 1-to-1 or sort of, but now it's like 40 to 1.
Okay.
We have all this stuff which is inflammatory,
All right.
which makes our body not work well and our brain not work well and our heart and so forth. And so, since most people are not going to change their diet very fast,
Right.
and they're not going to reduce these 6s, which
Right.
are sort of killing us,
Right.
They taste good, but they're killing us, okay? If you increase the 3s,
Right.
you can kind of create the balance,
Okay.
and they'll counteract each other. So omega-3s.
Okay, omega-3.
And that's proven by research, it's just
Right.
not a hypothesis.
Right.
So omega-3s, what else would be good? B12s.
B12.
Yeah,
Okay.
B12, and especially if they're vegetarian, you absolutely need B12s and B vitamins in general. So
Okay.
B12 and B vitamins. What a third one would be good? I'm trying to separate out from aging per se, because there's some things you need for aging because they go downhill. I think just a good multivitamin and minerals, a lot of great spectrum of minerals, because we don't get minerals in our diet anymore. We need a spectrum of minerals. So there's different combinations you can get on the market.
Are there regular products in the grocery stores? Something like a coconut oil, is that healthy?
Coconut oil is good. You know, you don't need a lot of it, but it's an alternative food source and energy source. It's mainly, I mean, there's nothing wrong with coconut oil. Okay, it's more valuable later in life because most people have sort of a type 3 diabetic, and the brain doesn't process sugar anymore very well. And coconut becomes something else, which then feeds the brain. So people who are getting older, coconut has a better, but coconut's all good anytime.
What other products can be used in common stores, which can be bought from common grocery stores?
Not much.
Not much?
Well, let's see if we could really dig in here. Let's see.
What do you use?
I don't go to grocery stores.
No?
Not a common ones.
Okay.
I don't go. I haven't been in a common grocery store. Well, occasionally I have it. We have an organic grocery store, a natural food store. In that aisles, then there's rice and dal. Okay. The omegas, all your great veggies. And there's a lot of pastas now. A lot of pastas that are made out of things like artichoke and quinoa. Quinoa is very valuable because it's good protein. You want to have good protein. Okay? And the Indian diet, actually, if it was held up and they didn't eat tons of jalebis and eat all day long, would be great. Right, Mexican diet with seaweed and beans and cheese and corn, that's great too. But everybody's eating all day long and all this junk. So these more traditional diets are the valuable ones, because that's what grew up out of the past when we didn't have all the current refined, sugary, all this kind of stuff, which is killing us.
There is this new thing coming up with superfoods, things like products like spirulina, things like flaxseed, hemp seeds. What's your take on it? Like, is it like just a new trend coming up, or is it?
Yeah, some of the algae stuff is good. You know? There's some good things there. The problem with the things like chia and flax and hemp, those three in particular, they're good proteins, they have good minerals, and they have some omegas, but it's the wrong kind of omega. It's not M6, it's the parent compound of 3, but when you eat those seeds, it doesn't get converted into what we really want of the 3s, because there's a whole sequence. So if you eat this one, you're going to go, get something. If you eat fish or have the omega-3s in your diet, then you automatically get it. So basically, you don't need a lot of those. And if you do, they definitely should chew them fresh. In other words, you don't pie the powder, because within maybe an hour or two, they're not worth anything, and after a while, they get toxic. Because so if you eat those things, they should, as seeds, they'll last forever. But if the minute you use them, break them open, you have to use them, and they should be used fresh. So they're very good, but they're not a source of omegas that we want, even though they're sold that way because people are selling all kinds of stuff.
Now, people selling all kinds of stuff is my next question. There is this new nootropic industry which is coming up, and everyone has been advocating. People are taking shortcuts for using brain-enhancing products and all. People like Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, and all. What is your take on it? Like, is the brain hacking a good thing or a wrong thing?
Brain hacking, in the sense of trying to get to the essence, and trying to make it really work well, and trying to get around all the outside stops and try to get to the center of it, is excellent. Nothing wrong with hacking, but the best hack is to hack it all the way in. Right? And that means to the self, pure consciousness. Inside, TM, transcending. Transcending is the ultimate hack. Because it gets to where everything is.
Deeper levels.
You actually get into the vault in the bank, where everything is worthwhile. Everything else is sort of distractions, You get into the vault, that's you. You want it. To hack on the surface could have some values, but it's a surface value understanding, a surface value appreciation, and influence. It's not the same thing as consciousness. Remember, everything's consciousness. Even the chia seed is consciousness. But when you enliven consciousness through transcending, you're using the full thing, as opposed to this little value of consciousness as chia seed or something like that, or this nootropic or something like that, or this supplement or something like that. These all have values, but you have to make sure that they're part of what you want. And so you have to make decisions. How do you make the best decisions? Make the best decisions to know who the heck you are. How do you know who you are? You haven't got a clue. Right, this is my name, this is my card, this is my wife, and this is whatever. Okay, that's not who you are.
Yeah.
That's that surface value of the imagery and the reality that you're caught up in,
Right.
which you're enjoying. And it's fine to enjoy it because we're here to enjoy it, but that's not you. That's the surface you. That's all this diversity you. It's not the ultimate synchronous unity of you. And if you get to that synchronous unity of you, what comes out of that
Right.
is exactly what you need at that point at that time, without someone having to tell you, although it can be value sometimes to remind you of things. You want to be spontaneously having the right thoughts and the right action. Everything else is somebody else's opinion, and who knows, how could I tell you what to do? I would have no clue.
Right.
I mean, I might have an opinion, but that doesn't mean it's useful.
Right.
You're the best knower of what you need to think and do at this point. And I can have suggestions that they may make
May
sense.
utilize or may not utilize.
yeah. And then that's the other thing, because everything's a suggestion ultimately out there.
Right.
And then you bounce off of those suggestions, but it has to come from inside.
Right.
And the only way to really know what's coming from inside if it's clean and clear and not all sort of stressed and messed and confused.
Okay. So, how does alcohol and psychedelics affect the brain functioning?
It distorts it.
Okay.
Different effects. It either
Okay.
shuts it down, distorts it, but in some way it makes it non-functional. All right. People use alcohol, the biggest source of self-medication on the planet that's socially acceptable.
Right.
And the
Stress relieving.
Yeah.
Substitute.
The basic problem we have out there is stress, and at the end of the day, you got to do something, or in the
Right.
middle of the day, or the morning, depends how bad it is.
Right.
You take alcohol, and you take alcohol for one reason.
Right.
You don't want to remember. You don't
Right.
want to be responsible. And you
Right.
don't want to have to care. You
Right.
want to be just easy.
Right.
So the only way to do that is to turn off your prefrontal cortex, because you should keep track of everything.
Right.
It knows what you have to do,
Right.
who you are, where you're going, and what you have to do. And then and so if you take that offline, you're just a happy camper. But at that point, you're just a big bunny rabbit. Okay.
Right.
And you're just bouncing around having fun. Okay. That's not human beings. That's sad. But in the face of alternatives, that's what we got. Okay. If you took away the alcohol, it'd be crazy out there, right? People, you think it's crazy now. You take away the alcohol, and people would be like, "What am I going to do with this stress?"
So in a way, it's helping the society.
Yes. Just like churches and everything else has some influence to keep things sort of cooled off, like you
sober
have to
down.
got to keep it sobered. It doesn't solve the problem. Church has
Right.
been around forever. Alcohol's been around forever. Hasn't solved a single problem. Momentarily, it solves every problem,
Yeah.
right? You go to the church, you feel great. After you go to church, you do whatever you want to do. Okay,
Right.
so. The point is, the only way to solve all of these problems is individually at the level of the self, because
Right.
that's where the problem starts and ends.
Right. So, explain
Did
neuro.
that answer the question? Actually?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Not the psychedelics one.
Oh,
Is it-
psychedelics. So
yeah.
they just cause confusion.
So,
It's just they mix up the circuits. So That doesn't mean psychedelics don't have a reality. It's just not a reality which is usually useful. Okay. And if you want to get in touch with who you are, you might as well get to the real self and not
Right.
another version of it.
Right.
See, this is a version of who we think we are.
Right.
All right. And you wake up in the morning, you have a slightly different version because you're fresher. Right. If you take alcohol, you get a different version of yourself.
Right.
If you take a psychotrope, you get a different version.
Right.
Now, they all have an impact on who we are,
Right.
but they're not who we are. So taking a psychedelic is not necessarily going to help us find out who we are. It's definitely not going to help you transcend.
Right.
Okay, and it's probably not going to be useful if you want to transcend. All right. So psychedelics are not recommended. All right, but again, people don't understand that the bank is already available. Right.
Yeah.
If they knew the bank was available, they wouldn't fool around with
Right.
the guy out front, right?
Right.
Trying to sell them something.
Right.
Excuse me, I gotta go to the bank. I'll talk to you later. Okay? And then you don't even talk to the lady at the front desk. You say, "I'm sorry, I gotta go into the vault." All right. Excuse me, I'm just going to the vault. All right? You're in the vault. Everything's there. Okay. They
Right.
come to you now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you already knew that and had that experience, then all this stuff would be irrelevant.
Right.
No one would ever want to use alcohol because
Right.
it just reduced that beautiful experience.
Right.
Alcohol is like putting a fire into the vault. Who wants a
Right.
fire in the vault, right? So all these things just distort life, but because life is already distorted, we don't know the difference and we can't evaluate it properly.
So, is the society so messed up right now that use of alcohol, use of all these things, and the way how media and everything is showcasing things, music even, like things, trends, is that a way of calming things down? Is that a way of
Yeah, everything is entertainment.
numbing things down.
Yeah, just entertaining the people, keeping them happy. You know, you want happy people, otherwise you have problems, right? That's what happened in India, right? It's a side thing, but Britain, they found out that India, everybody was happy a long time ago, and they realized, this is all written down.
Okay.
And they realized, they went back home and they told everybody back home in England that everybody's very happy. And the only way we're going to be able to run this country and take advantage of all the riches and the resources and rip it off and so on like that is to eliminate their culture, so they can't be happy. If they're not happy, then they're going to need us to make them happy. So they got rid of the happiness and the culture, and then everybody depended upon the British, and so that's how British ruled India. But British left, and what was left, everything was all sort of dismantled in a mess. Where's Veda, right? Now it's, McDonald's. That's not happiness. Right? I mean, they say it's happiness, but for some people it's happiness.
But it's not serving happiness.
Not
in a family
long.
pack.
Maybe for just a moment when you get that first bite after a while, it's like, I've had that
Trans
before.
fats.
Yeah. So it's just everybody's trying to be happy,
right.
And the way to control society is to sort of cultivate happiness.
Right.
Now, it's a nice thing to do. People should be happy, but happiness is actually inside.
Right.
Right. It's not. It doesn't get generated really from the outside. Right? I mean, they try, and it works to some extent.
Yeah.
But that's not true happiness. That's just momentary fooling around, and then they get mad in the next moment. Yeah.
So, explain to us how the conscious part and the subconscious part of brain function from a neuroscience perspective.
Yeah. Well, you couldn't have asked this question 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You weren't allowed, actually.
Okay. We were not allowed?
No.
Okay.
You don't ask that question. Not allowed. Okay. 20 years ago, that would have been the end of your job. Okay. However.
End of the job?
Yeah. Okay. Consciousness was not allowed to be discussed. It was not scientific. It was not something you did. You did get money for it. It was not on the plate. Right? But in the last 10 years, it's just things are changing. Consciousness, yoga, the whole thing. Things are changing, and now people study consciousness. Now, of course, they really don't understand consciousness because there's two forms of consciousness as a background. There's, I am conscious of this, right? So if I have an object like my hand, I'm conscious of it. So that's consciousness.
Right.
But there's another kind of consciousness, which means if all of this disappears and I'm still awake and there's no objects, then that's consciousness too, because I'm still awake. Right. But there's no wakefulness of any object, space, or time. That's pure consciousness, Atma, this silence deep inside. So there's actually two forms of consciousness. One primary form, consciousness in its pure state, and then consciousness when it takes on a form that we call an object, object of thought or bunny rabbit or whatever it is.
Right.
Modern science is on the level of the relative.
Right.
They're looking in at the brain, looking in at consciousness, right? And all they see is objects, and we're aware of them. So their world is consciousness of objects.
Right.
So if you don't have an object, they don't study it, okay? They don't think it exists because unless they have the experience of consciousness without space and time, I mean, that's not possible. I mean, you need space and time to live and to breathe and to have anything.
The dimensions.
Yeah, you have to have all of this to be aware, okay? But they don't have the experience of transcending.
Right.
So if they did, then they'd probably think twice about what they do. But however, what's happened the last 10 years is people starting to now dive into the brain because they know that something's coming up.
Right.
They've known that a long time. There's just stuff underneath there, right? Freud, right? The whole thing.
Yeah.
It's stuff coming up, right? And it's a mixed up, and it's all messy in there, okay? Right. And that's why they weren't allowed to do it because it's messy. Unless you're getting paid as a psychiatrist, and then you make money and still don't have it. Okay. So there's a surface, and they started working there, and all of a sudden they realized, geez, what's underneath the surface? So now they're studying the brain, and they're asking what happens just before you're aware of something.
Right.
So it's a classic experiment. If I do like that very fast, you see it, you hear it, okay?
Right.
But if I go like that very fast and then I do something else, I can mask it. And then I say, did he see this or did I get masked, right? I go like this. So I know all you see is my hand.
Right.
Now for a second, for a fraction of a second, you did this, but this is what dominated.
Right.
Now the question is, did this get in? And if it did get in, how far did it get in? And what effect did it leave behind?
Right.
Because this is obvious. Yeah, I saw the hand, and yeah, I like it or don't like it. What about this?
Right.
So now they can study it, and you can go all the way back in, and they have sequence of what's going on, and in the brain, the sequence. What happens is information flows in, and then it gets, let's say, visual information. You see this thing?
Right.
Okay. It gets in the back of the brain, and then it moves forward, and then starts integrating, and the whole thing like that.
Right.
And within about a third of a second or less.
Okay.
Your whole brain has been figuring out this thing.
Whoa. Third of a second.
Less than a third of a second.
Okay.
You're not aware of it.
Right.
You have no idea. But the brain's got the whole thing.
Right.
Right. It's going to say, I like it, I don't like it, I'm going to get it or not get it, I'm going to buy it tomorrow or not
Right.
buy it tomorrow. It's worked out the whole scenario.
Okay.
Right. But you don't know it. And then it just goes away.
And that's purely programming. What happened over there?
Yes, it's the whole brain, everything gets into the brain.
Right.
And but some things get into your awareness.
Right.
It takes about 3 to 4 tenths of a second to get into what they call avalanche mode. That information got to enough parts of the brain, in particular prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex go, that's what I want. I'm going to put my attention there. And then it just ignites everything. They also call it ignition.
Right.
You get this ignition, and then wham, into your awareness, you get this.
Right.
But just before that, no, it was not there. Right. So everything's getting in.
Right.
Right. Everything gets in. You walk down the road, you see everything.
Right.
Your brain sees everything.
Right.
You see every tree, every car, every face, pretty much, right? I mean, it's kind of a muddle.
Right.
But you only see that, and then you only see that, and you only see that, because we're sequential and limited, but the brain's analyzing everything.
So without even seeing, we are seeing so many things which
The
is
brain
getting
is seeing. You're saying we, but you
The
mean
brain.
the brain. The
The
brain
brain.
is cognizant of a lot.
Okay.
Also the body at the same time. How
Right.
your big toe's doing.
Right.
You haven't thought about it, but now you are.
Yeah.
Right? But it was keeping track of your big toe.
Right.
Right. And the only reason to know that because if all of a sudden something happened to your big toe, you know the
I don't
difference.
know. Yeah.
Only you know the difference because you knew what was going on before.
Right.
It's keeping track of everything. If there's some change, it says, oh, there's a difference, I need to attend to it.
So that's why you call it the CEO.
Yes, it's in charge of everything. Anything important anyway.
Right.
I mean, you can get rid of it and you can just say, oh. So, but that's not life, that's funny rabbits.
So how can human beings access the subconscious part of the brain? And when the active stimulus, the impulses from outside, it's in a way programming our psyche, our deeper sense of self.
Right.
How can a person...
We get conditioned.
We get conditioned, programmed.
Yes, we're all conditioned.
We're all conditioned.
Right, you grow up in a family and that's how you think. You grow
Right.
up in a society, that's how you think.
Right.
You watch TV, that's how you think.
Right. Is there conditioning which is coming from maybe prior sequences of birth if you follow the
Sure.
Hindu Vedic
Yeah.
culture?
Yeah, modern science will tell you that what your grandfather and great-grandfather do is influencing you right now.
Genetics.
Genetics, yes.
Right.
I mean, there's the real genetics, and then they used to think that it was just the genes, your eye color, how tall you're going to be,
Right.
muscles, or whatever.
Right.
But now they know that on your genes there's all these little tags,
Right.
which means that this is how we're going to use my genes.
Right.
Which means if I do this,
Right.
I'm going to be a really good cobbler,
Right.
shoemaker. Okay. If I do this, I'm going to be a really good computer scientist. If I
Right.
do this, I'm going to be a great housewife or whatever.
Right.
The point is that all those tags are on those genes, and they are on your genes. They go through the cycle.
Right.
Not just the genes themselves, but the tags also. This is epigenetics.
Epigenetics.
Yeah.
Right.
The epi means on top of or in addition. So, like epidermis. So this is the stuff that's on top of your genes,
Okay.
which is saying this is the best way to program them. This is
Right.
the best kind of life.
Right.
So these are influences. So we're born, we're influenced, these singers come out of nowhere. But somewhere in the past, there was some real singing going on there,
Right.
and they may not know that, but there was some possibility there. So we're living a lot of the past. It's just flowing through us. And what we do with it has a tendency to make our life easier or not. If we go against it, it's a little harder path.
Right.
But if we go with it, then it makes things easier because we're already programmed that way. All right, so that we're programmed and conditioned.
So how can a person tap into the subconscious, and is it even accessible?
Well, the subconscious is by definition non-conscious.
Yeah.
So, if you want to be a psychiatrist and get people to kind of dream and drift in there and kind of fool around, yeah, you can spend a lot of money but minimal effects. Otherwise, we'd have a great society, right? Psychiatrists would be everywhere and everyone would be pure.
The regression therapies you're talking about.
Yeah, all this stuff. I mean, there's some little effects sometimes, but usually it's disaster or causes more problems. Okay.
Right.
So the idea here is that we don't want the subconscious.
Right.
We don't want all this. The subconscious is there because of all the stress.
Right.
So theoretically, if you go into the subconscious, you're going to be confronted with all this nonsense.
The junk which is lying around.
Which is making. See, all right. At the base of your mind, the base of your awareness is that pure consciousness, the source of thought. And then thoughts bubble up to the surface. And then we go, oh, I got a thought.
Right.
Below that is all the subconscious or
Right.
the unconscious. Okay.
Okay.
So now every thought coming out has perfect, beautiful, pure intentions,
Right.
because that's all the self has.
Right.
The universe only has good coming out of it.
Right.
I mean, even if it looks bad. Okay? So good coming out. But what happens by the time it gets to surface, it can be completely distorted, which is usually the case.
Right.
This is called human frailty and human
Yeah.
mistakes and everything else.
Right.
Because between here and here, there's a lot of stuff that's
Right.
not quite wired right.
Our own
Which-
definitions, our own
Yes,
ways of...
how we biases, how we look
Right.
at things, how we interpret. Because
Right.
everything's an interpretation.
Right.
Stuffing goes in, the interpretation goes in, what do you
Right.
get out? So it can be garbage in, it can be garbage out.
Right.
Or it can be pure in and pure out.
Right.
So that pure in and pure out depends on what's going through. And you can think of either the wires in the brain and synapses aren't quite perfectly coherent, or you can think of it like an ocean that's all muddy and something's trying to get through it. Okay.
Right, right.
And lots of things all at the same time. We have many thoughts and desires, and they're conflicting and fighting, and I want this but I don't want that, and I like it, I don't like. And then by the time you get a service, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Okay. So the idea is psychiatrists and psychologists are trying to help you penetrate, and
Right.
also some of the post-traumatic stress therapies, they're trying
Right.
to get you to go in there and fix things.
Right.
You can't fix it that way.
Okay.
And if you do it all, it doesn't work very well, and it's very slow, and it's
Right.
painful.
Right.
I mean, it can be very painful. Okay?
Right.
So people don't like it. So
Huh.
and it doesn't really work. Like I said, if it did, we'd be in great shape.
Right.
The only way to get from here to here and get rid of the subconscious is to actually go through it, not go into it and analyze it. Well, what are you going to do?
Right.
The psychiatrist sits there for hours helping you analyze what?
Hypnotherapies and regression
Yes,
sessions.
yes. I mean, it's just. I mean, they're well intended, and there's
Right.
some little effects and some help and stuff like that, but it's not the big picture. It's not transcending, going through the whole range of the mind,
Right.
getting to where all the memory is, all the intelligence, all the creativity and happiness and bliss and energy.
Right.
And then what happens is that eventually the brain gets better, gets more orderly, it throws off all that stress and strain, gets wired better, and then there is no subconscious in that way. It's this things still take some time to come out, but you can be awake to the whole thing, and it's just purity.
Right.
So I don't recommend people going in
and analyzing.
trying to fix.
Right.
It's an impossibility, because who can figure out what synaptic configuration or what set of thoughts have to be fixed in what way?
Right.
I mean, over how many centuries of whatever?
Right.
Okay, it's almost impossible. It's like taking a library, blowing it up, and saying, "Now let's read the literature." Right? Where do you start? Okay.
Right.
I mean, it's all there, but it's like, whoa, you know. Okay.
So, can you explain to us about neuroplasticity and three things which people
I love
can
neuroplasticity.
Three things which people can do to improve it?
Good. So neuroplasticity means that the neuro and plasticity are mixed together, but the brain is plastic. That means it's changing. Everything we do changes us. Every thought, everything we see, everything we do is changing who we are.
Right.
It changes who we are because it changes all the synapses.
Right.
Every impulse of information gets in there and it changes the wires. In fact, they estimated that all your wires and connections, within a year, they're almost all changed. So, where's the stability of all that, right?
Right.
So that's another question. But the point is things are changing, right?
Right.
Things getting pulled, putting things. It's like a big switchboard. Ding, 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 ding.
Happening on its own.
Yeah. I mean, it's automatic. I mean, this is real intelligence. How to rewire the brain every moment to make your brain better,
Right.
or if you do the wrong thing, worse. Okay,
Right.
It's going to adapt what you do. Right. If you go to a war zone, it's going to change your brain to survive in a war zone.
Right.
If you go home, you got the wrong brain, right? Because it's now a war zone brain, and that's why you have problems, because it's just wired itself to be in a war zone, and you can't go down an aisle in a supermarket and think you're going to survive. Okay.
PTSD.
Yeah. Because the brain constantly gets rewired. You feed it information, it takes that and says, how can I be the best that? Right? Violin, war, whatever you want to feed it, it tries to be the best that.
Right.
If you feed it bad stuff, it becomes the best bad stuff. Okay?
Right.
It's neutral. The brain just says, what do you want me to be? I'll try to be the best of that. Okay?
So, in a way, you're saying we create our reality by getting into any environment and conditioning ourselves?
You could say you choose everything in life. You choose everything in life. You choose everything in life. Everything you feed yourself, the spinach, the movies, whatever we're feeding through the senses and the food, that's who we become.
Right.
If you eat pizza all the time, become a giant pizza. Okay. I mean, that's the idea, right?
Right.
Every pizza you had has influence. Your liver is a reflection of all the pizzas you've had.
Right.
It's wired genetically to deal with pizzas.
Right.
That's right. And what to do with vegetables, right?
Right.
And vice versa. Okay. It's like if you're a vegetarian, you take a pizza. It's like, wow, what am I gonna do with that? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We've ordered one.
Yes.
We've
We'll
got
have the
3,
experience.
2. Let's eat.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a signal here.
Yeah. All right.
Wrap it up.
Thanks.